Hello and welcome back to the podcast. So in this episode, it's kind of we're playing catch up a little bit in that, Hunter, you just recorded a podcast episode, 2 nights ago?
Yeah, it was a couple nights ago. We had some pretty great insights in it, but we still got to do some editing here and there. So
Right. So I just kind of want to get caught up, but also too, I think it's important for us to kind of have these types of episodes where we're actually able to, like, for example, we can pull Raj in and say, hello. Raj, I'm glad you can make it. Also, Raj, if you have any specific questions about analytics or getting an analytics job, please ask, because we have probably 5 or 6 talking points that we can kind of lean on. But here we're trying to really get the audience to start engaging with us and asking questions. Because I realize that I'm like 7 years in now, and a lot of you are brand new to analytics, and I'm not dialed in exactly to what you guys might need, which is part of the reason why, Hunter, you've kind of taken a more prominent role.
yeah, a little bit. I've gone a little bit more into the hosting space, and I'm still getting the hang of things. But I think that sometimes having new people come on gives just a different perspective from
Right.
different guests. So that's also why we were bringing on our apprentices as well, is because we can get different takes from different people. So starting off with transitioning people, or people who are new into the field, people who've been in it for a little while, people who've been in it for a long while. But yeah.
Well, I think it's value additive because a lot of the people who are 5-10 years in are like, hey, all your content's about people breaking in. And I think that starting to incorporate more and more people, like, for example, Justin has been working as an analyst for 3 years and has 9 years of marketing experience. So getting his insights on what it's like as just someone who has quite a bit of experience, I think could be really insightful for those who are brand new to kind of chart forward and say, like, okay, well, maybe I could start learning about marketing, maybe like Justin did, where it's like he's got a side hustle where he runs the marketing for a chiropractor firm.
Right.
It's like, okay, so I'm developing that business acumen on top of working full time as an analyst, and then maybe 7 years out, I could combine those together and have like a really, really cool job.
Right, and it was really cool for me to see, especially in his episode, we kind of got to work through his whole personal branding funnel. And it's like, okay, where are you going wrong? Oh, you're not searching for the right jobs. Here, let's get you set up with the right keywords so that you can find what you've been looking for.
Yeah, and then ironic
the parameters. Yeah,
that he's a marketing expert and had a marketing issue. Like, like it was the top of the funnel, like the awareness of, like, okay, you're not on the radar of the right opportunities for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sometimes when you're looking at your own professional development, it's hard to see when that starts to occur, when that kind of problem starts to occur, because you're looking at yourself. It's sometimes just nice to get an outside perspective.
Right. What's the saying? The cobbler's kids have no shoes.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I feel the same way about, like.
How do you mean?
And I what?
How do you mean? How do you mean?
I thought you said adding me.
No.
So recently I was interviewing someone and they were like, oh, so I bet you have like really robust data on like all the people applying for the program, for the apprenticeship program. And I'm like, no, I have a Google Forms. And I think it's hard for like brand new companies to, like, they're all focused on implementation. It would be awesome if I had like a data architect who could almost like sit me down and like put me through some like data therapy of like, all right, well, you might need this in the future. Have you considered that? And I think that's what we're going to revisit by the end of the year, redoing the form so that we could actually turn that into a data set that our students could study. So we'll take all the private information off, and then we'll have location, age, some psychographic components, and then we could potentially start adding data to that of, okay, this was a good qualified lead, or this wasn't. This was a lead that we interviewed but didn't go through, and this was a qualified lead that we interviewed and it came through. So then we can start to do some psychographic or just some demographic analysis on what's actually working and what's not. So we can
Right.
start to focus on, all right, who are the people, who are the personas that really, really resonate with this?
Right. And we're seeing a lot of those people come into the program, right? You know, we've had quite a few successes with Justin and with Pete and
Mhm.
with Chandler, and I could keep
Yeah, I was
going,
about to
but
say, yeah, well, okay, that's actually something I did want to talk about. It's like, what are the major lessons that we've learned launching the apprenticeship program? What was that, 7 months ago? And then we launched the career services program 2 months ago.
yeah.
Like, what do you think are the major lessons that we could pull out of that?
Well, one of my major lessons personally is learning how to work in a team and an
Mhm.
analytics team. That's something that I never had experience with before because Silvertone is my first analytics job,
Right.
and I think that it's great to be able to bounce ideas off of other people. I think especially because when you've been consulting for a little while, like before I started teaching, I was doing consulting work for about a year and a half, and I think sometimes you can get encumbered with your own roadblock where it's like, okay, I'm stuck on this problem. I can't think of any way to get over this. But when you're working it with an analytics team, it's just totally different. It's like, oh, there's three other
Yeah.
people who are working through the same problem at the same time as me.
Yeah, that's such a privilege because when I launched my Silvertone, the consulting agency, I had no one to lean on. So it was like either I just had to figure it out or I didn't get paid.
Right. Also, I
And
see there's 5 people viewing right now. Also, while we're talking this through, if anybody has any questions, just feel free type in the chat.
awesome. Cool. So Paula, welcome. Let us know if you have any questions about analytics or getting maybe transitioning or learning a new skill or anything like that. Yeah, but Hunter, I do think that, and that's part of what they talk about vaguely and like, what are your teamwork skills? And I
Hmm.
think being able to realize, okay, I'm stuck on this. Maybe I can go reach over and talk to Andy over here and he can figure it out in 2 seconds.
Right.
And it also kind of helps you like maintain your sanity because I mean there watching Silvertone, there were so many sleepless nights where I was like, I cannot figure this out. So like,
Well,
yeah, you
so
Google it, but go ahead.
the students, well, the students sometimes feel that way too. I think with their own personal projects before they start getting into the technical segment, where it's like they say, "Oh, it's not good enough. It's not ready yet. I can't show anybody. I have to get this perfect for myself first before anybody else on the planet can see this." And then they get into the technical segment, and we start running the cohort with some real data, and we're sitting there like, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? And they think but subconsciously they're thinking to themselves, oh, i I know what I'm doing. I just Everyone is in the same struggle as me, kind of deal, you know.
Yeah. When you said that you running as project manager and then showing them like, oh, I'm running into a dead end. I can't figure this out right now. And then going in like, I'm actually curious because I'm not on these calls for those who are listening. Like Hunter's running the projects now. Do you literally pull up like a Google tab and say, all right, we can't figure out data modeling issue in Power BI or something like that?
Yeah, so I actually do literally make a Google Doc right in the middle of if I encounter a problem. Actually, generally when I'm starting a project, I'll start trying to get a general idea of the data schema, and then I'll just get a very simple, like hopefully 1 page or less, just some notes that I want to work towards, and then
Mhm.
as I gradually finish each thing, just cross it off the list. I'm a list crosser. That's something that my mom made me.
I was gonna say
Um,
I am not that at all. I just like get an idea and then I run with it,
yeah.
which is why it's so important that I'm building a team around me because you like actually stay on track, and I'm just like, oh, this isn't. But that's what you see with entrepreneurs. It's like I have shiny objects syndrome, also known as squirrel brain, where I'm just like, oh, this is exciting. Let's go do this. And then I need like that grounding. But
Well, I
what I
think it's a
was,
good thing. I think it's a good thing to have, though, is to be able to jump to a new idea because sometimes getting stuck
yeah,
on one thing.
well, I think it's good to have a mix and a blend of both. And I'm getting to a point in like, I guess my own professional development where I'm like, okay, this is one of my downsides.
Hmm.
I am not organized.
Hmm.
And the ironic thing is that I don't think I'm nearly as good as analytics or analytics work or analyzing data as I am at coaching.
Hmm.
So, but that's really what like one of your strengths, right? Like
I
you
don't know
just
because I don't know if that's true or not because you still come on some of the technical meetings and you're like, why aren't you just doing this, Hunter? I'm like, oh,
well, that's different though. That's because I've been working in this space for 7 years,
I
so
get it.
I can just like because what I've done over that 7 year time period is I've developed mental models.
I don't know who this is, but this was interesting to read.
I can relate to figuring things out. Oh yeah, LinkedIn user. I wonder why we can't see their name. That's interesting.
It's interesting. I don't know.
I can relate to figuring things out on your own. I agree it's nice to work with a team for the knowledge and best practice. So this is a hot topic that I'm seeing like very hotly debated online.
Hmm.
Is are there more downsides to working remotely than upsides? We just outlined one of the downsides here. You
Yeah.
can't just go over to someone's desk and ask them a question who's like either your manager or just more experienced in the same role that you have. So that's a major downside.
And this is
Okay.
Deborah Adams,
Deborah
apparently.
Adams. Thank you for the comments and
I,
questions.
I'm assuming this is her same question.
What skills do you recommend a person to have in today's analytics world? All right, wait, before we get into that, Hunter, what do you think about the working remotely versus in person?
Oh, I agree completely because I don't know how many people know this, but every single summer I have to go back home to Florida because I'm still a working student. And so every time I'm home, it's noticeably more difficult to collaborate work sessions with John David because you're just on different parts of the world. It's hard to get your schedules the same. It's hard to get to to just float those ideas like you're saying
Mm-hmm.
by and just say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" kind of deal. And I think that's something that working remote is never going to I don't think it's ever going to be able to authentically replicate what it's like to work with a team just
Well, what's funny is you know what I envisioned my career being at this point when I was your age. Have you heard of this concept called geo arbitrage?
Mm-mm.
So it's where you can leverage currencies against each other. So let's say that I work for an American company as an analyst, but I moved to Playa del Carmen, Mexico.
Uh-huh.
I recently, just because I was curious, I looked up like you can rent on Airbnb like a high rise like condo on the beach for $1,000 USD a month. So you earn American dollars and you spend Mexican pesos. So
Wow.
you were like 3 or 4 times comparatively richer. So
Interesting.
that and it's funny because I did travel in Latin America a bit, and then I was like, it's actually not as exciting as I thought it was.
Uh-huh.
like because so I've been in Greensboro. This is where I grew up. I went away for undergrad. I have relationships that span 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's interesting. Like my relationship with Ryan. I think I've known Ryan for 6 years. We've worked on multiple businesses together. We meet once a week. Actually introduced him to his wife. Like we have like really deep relationships, and that's what you give up when you work remotely. All right,
Right.
so
And that's what
Deb,
you gain when you go into the Sorts and Analytics Apprenticeship program is your network.
that's
Anyway.
true. Yeah, and that's kind of what we've been showcasing is that hey, if you come into our program, we can have you on the podcast, and we can get you talking to hiring managers, experts in the area that you want to learn more about. So because that's the downside of like professors typically like to keep like a really tight grip on the power structure of like I am the expert. The correct answer is C. You need to listen and you need to take notes and just regurgitate back. I'm like, I don't know what it's like being a supply chain analyst, or for example, I don't know what it's like being the analytics manager at Home Depot, but I know John Weininger and I can just pull him on and get
Right.
his thoughts and opinions.
Right.
All right, so sorry, we got totally sidetracked. Actually,
Yeah,
this
we
is
did.
exactly what we wanted to do. It's just kind of have like a random bounce around episode. All right, so Deborah was asking, what skills do you recommend a person to have in today's analytics world? Hunter, what are your thoughts?
Well, if you're talking about hard skills, then I always start with Tableau, Excel, Power BI, SQL. Ding, ding, ding. You get those four, you can probably do 90%, 95% of the analytics work that's required in the world today. However, I don't think that's all that is required. Hard skills. What do you think, John David?
I think the whole, I think the question's got it backwards. I think it's overvaluing skills.
Yeah.
Like I think that, and we're seeing that. And this is one of the lessons we learned is that we got one of our apprentices got an $85,000 offer where she's going to use Python day in and day out. Did not have a day of Python training, but they liked her so much that they said, not only are we going to pay you, which I think it was like a $30,000 or $40,000 pay increase, we're going to pay you this rate. We're going to pay for a company to train you, and we're going to pay you for your time to go through that training. So I think that there's an overemphasis on skills. And I think the right question is, what am I good at and what am I intrigued by?
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with that, especially because we've had so many students that are in that similar situation to what you just described, where they might not have a as solid of a understanding of every single tool that the job listing says. So listen, the job listings are not always going to be 100% accurate. I think they are trying to cast a very specific one little cubic centimeter net, when in reality, um, it's just a lot of those skills that they say on the job listings are not necessarily required.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's more important to have just a better communication with whoever you do want to work for, and just be honest with them and say, "Hey, I might not know this yet," or even better, you can say that you know it and then force yourself to meet those expectations, which is kind of what you did with me when it came to consulting work. And
Yeah, I just kind of pushed you in the deep end and you figured it out.
yeah,
I
and I
mean, there's
think
something to that of like, you need to be uncomfortable because growth is a little bit painful or uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people self-sort themselves. They sort themselves out, self-sort
yeah,
themselves. Now
yeah.
redundant. Okay, so yeah, and I don't mean to be hard on the question, like what skills do you recommend? I think Excel is probably the best place to start because
Mhm.
that is the most ubiquitous analytics tool that's out there. And then maybe go through some case studies and start figuring out what you're interested in. Maybe you figure out that, oh, I like marketing analytics. Well, then start researching and make your skill stack specific to the vertical of the business that you want to go into.
Mhm.
And there's also another nuance point here of, do you want to go big company or do you want to go small company? Because Hunter, you
Right.
mentioned SQL, right?
Yeah, I mentioned SQL.
I haven't touched a single line of SQL code in 7 years consulting with medium to small size businesses.
Yeah.
So, but if you want to work for a Fortune 500 company, their data is so big that they keep all their data in databases. To where, yeah, well, okay. Actually, what's interesting is the only $1 billion company that we've consulted with,
Still
you
does.
actually ran the program, or you actually ran the consulting engagement. They were using a database, but
They were.
they had already hired a data architect to connect their databases to the Tableau infrastructure. So all you had to do was just build out on top of that,
Mhm.
which that was such a cool project.
It was. It was perfect. It was perfect for me.
Awesome. All right, I think we've harped on this question enough.
Yeah.
So what skills? It depends on kind of where you want to go. So I would say self-reflect first, figure out what you're good at, and then also what's valuable, and then go from there. All right. So let's see what Paul is saying. I try to remember done is better than perfect with small data projects as I self-study, but it's a hard habit to break. Perfectionism. Let's talk about that. That's a great topic. And okay, here's a little teaser. So in the new analytics career services podcast, I actually brought on a clinical therapist to talk about perfectionism and imposter syndrome in depth.
Mhm.
So Hunter, what's I'm curious, what's been your struggle with perfectionism?
Oh man. Um, I think part of my struggle with perfectionism has to be with less about the actual work that I do and more about starting the work that I do. Let me try
Okay,
to.
yeah, I see what I think I know what you're actually. You go ahead. I think I see what
Well,
you're saying though.
well, can you please help me because I don't
Okay,
think I'm gonna be able to gather the words for this, but
So instead of jumping in the pool, you're trying to optimize on where's the best spot
to
for
jump
me
in.
to go from dry land into water. And it's going to be cold and it's going to be uncomfortable at first. Then I'll acclimate. Is that not the perfect metaphor for that?
That's pretty much exactly perfectly it. Yeah.
And I think that people who are drawn to analytics are typically I think they're vulnerable to overthinking.
Hmm.
And it's like you're so in your head, you're not in your body at all.
Right.
Like you're not feeling your gut instinct, and you're just analyzing, and then you come up with an insight, and then you pick that insight apart. And it's what was the phrase? Paralysis by analysis.
Hmm.
See,
Hmm.
I'm more of a grip it and rip it kind of guy.
Yeah.
Where I don't think, I just go and do it. To where what I'm trying to do now, since I've got leverage, and so what I mean by that, when I say I have leverage, if I make a good decision, it's going to be really good because we've got the podcast, we've got Greensboro College as a partner. So if we come up with a good program that gets traction, it can get a ton of traction. But
Hmm.
if it's a bad decision, then
It can have disastrous
yeah, it
consequences.
could ruin relationships that I've taken
Right.
decades to build.
Right.
So I'm having to do the opposite, where I'm trying to take a page from your book and start thinking more about my decisions, because I'll
Hmm.
just get an idea and act on it, and that's cool when you're young, and that's actually what you should do. I think in your 20s, is just somewhat impulsively act and then reflect back on, was that good or bad for me? Because
Right.
you don't really know anything when you're in your 20s. It's not like you have years of working experience. You have school, which increasingly that's becoming more and more divergent from the actual workplace, I would say. So
Yeah.
you come out and it's like you don't really know anything.
Hmm. I mean, it's a lot of, well, that's something that I'm struggling with a little bit as well, is the fact that I still am in academia, and I can't, I don't want to knock it, because I think that specifically High Point University has given me certain tools that have helped me over the years. However, I think that it doesn't come even close to what you gave me, which was the ability to self teach. That's something that I never really had before. And when I first took your
Yeah.
class way back when, and that first time you said, "All right, Hunter, you take the wheel today," up at the front of the room, it's like, it's like a totally different change. It's a change in your mind, where it's like, okay, I I can change what my life is going to be for the better
Yeah.
right now.
All right. We got another overthinker, Jason, here. So you're not alone, Hunter. Let
Yeah.
me make sure that I didn't miss any of these. We'll get to as many of these chat logs as we possibly can. Thank you so much for submitting the questions. But yeah, so I think what you do in college is you just consume information.
Hmm.
They tell you what to do, they tell you when to show up, they tell you what to memorize, and then you regurgitate it back.
Yeah.
I think once you get into like grad and PhD level, you're starting to do the actual creation. Um, but I don't think that's how you really learn anything.
Right.
Like what you had is you had stakes. Like if you didn't figure it out, I'm not going to pay you again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's putting it overly harsh. I would have
It,
helped you if you would have
is it
got.
though?
Well, you've gotten stuck multiple times and I've had to intervene. But
Yeah.
like I've seen your progression of you're actually like you care. You're I like Hunter. I don't think you realize like how much you've changed in the last year and a half. Like you
Been a year and
actually
a half.
like
Yeah.
I've noticed like not only are you technically more sound, but you have more confidence. You've always been a good communicator, but I would say that it was a learning curve for that first podcast episode that you hosted of like I'm used to being the student, not the one in charge. And I mean, it's been what, a month and a half, and I feel like you've already adapted to that role
I feel a lot better about it. I feel more comfortable asking questions and kind of directing the flow of the conversation,
and interrupting people.
and interrupting people sometimes if they go on a little bit too long, which is
Right?
fine.
Yeah, and which is it's really uncomfortable. Well, you grew up in Florida, so you're not in the South, but
Right.
like,
Southern hospitality is
is
still
that
a
is that
thing
a
in
thing?
Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard Florida is like its own thing.
South
Like it's
Florida
like
can be.
it's
Certain
it's like
parts of
its
South Florida.
own weird, unique
I
culture.
think Miami is like its own. The whole
Okay.
area of Miami is its own state, and then there's the rest of Florida, and then the rest of the country, I think.
Right, because well, we are in this as Southerners, we are conscientious listeners or communicators. So we're going to
Right.
wait for pauses before we start to talk, to where people up north, and this grates on me a lot of times, especially if they're an active communicator. So they like the way that they will show that they're listening is they will say yeah or or like if they are an active communicator like most northerners and they're negative, it just grates on me because then they're saying no and then they're going off and they're trying to argue with me and I cannot stand that. But I'm realizing that they're not trying to be rude, they are trying to just contribute to the conversation.
Yeah.
So
That's a little side tangent right there. No offense to any Northerners listening right now, by the way. But
yeah.
I see that we have something from Maria here.
Where
This.
put in. Okay, today there are a lot of different programs and classes where you can learn analytics. What would be the best program, class, college to choose in order to be competitive in the labor market? Is it necessary to have major in analysis, or would you say boot camp is enough for starters? We didn't plant this question, I promise
This
you.
is an actual question for everyone listening.
So of course we're going to say our analytics apprenticeship program is very innovative, and you're what we just talked about with Hunter, where there are stakes, like you have to figure this out. Like the way that we're structuring this program is you go a month in and we give you a foundational training in analytics. Then month 2, you're out in the field working with a real consulting client, and you were tasked at taking the first hack at solving the problem. And then if you can't figure it out, it gets kicked up to Hunter. If Hunter can't get it figured out, it gets kicked up to me. So, of course, the Greensboro College Analytics Apprenticeship Program, I think, well, actually, I mean, I'm fairly confident at this point, like it's changing the way it's essentially bridging the gap between boot camps, which a lot of those are fly-by-night organizations, so be very careful, and colleges, which are kind of dubious in the opposite direction of like, just because they have 250 years of history doesn't mean that they are relevant today. So what we're doing is kind of trying to bridge the two of those. And then also the apprenticeship aspect of it is huge, because what that gives you is a conduit to tell how you have analyzed data. So you'll be working with a C-suite executive team and a company that, Hunter, how big is the current client that we're working with right now?
Well, so it's South Atlantic Packaging. They have hundreds of thousands of lines of
Okay.
data and revenue and millions of dollars in revenue, and it's a really lucrative company. It is.
Right. So we're working with their CFO and their CEO, and the phase that we're going to be working on in this next cohort that starts in 2 weeks is their team is going to bring all of their key employees together and show them the dashboard. And then we're going to have like 5 or 6 different iterations of the dashboard. So one for the sales manager, one for the operations manager, one for the sourcing agent. It just depends on like whoever their key employees are. And then each apprentice is going to have their own responsibility of you need to build out this infrastructure to expand on what we've already built.
Mm-hmm.
But to get back to that question of how to kind of figure out if the program is worth its salt, go and look at the reviews, because people are pretty honest now. Like if it is a bad program, they're going to get grilled on places like Reddit. For example, I know there's a company that partners with major universities to do their certifications, and they have developed a curriculum, and then they partner with the university and then find someone local who's an expert. And apparently that program varies wildly depending on who is the local person that is actually running the program. Because a lot of tech people are terrible at communicating and especially like educating others. Like they just want to go and code in the dark room. If that's your professor, you're going to have a really bad time. And as far as colleges go, I think that it's kind of a U-shape distribution. So you either want to go with the most expensive, highest tier name brand, or you want to go as cheap as possible and not worry about the brand. Because unfortunately, the state of analytics as it is today is you're going to be cut off from probably 80% of opportunities if you don't have a college degree. Mm-hmm. We're trying to change that with the apprenticeship program, and we currently have let our first person who doesn't have a degree in, but that's probably 5 to 10 years out before people are going directly into analytics without a college degree. Hunter, what do you think?
I mean that's what I've been seeing, especially since I'm in academia. I'm seeing them try to um, try to fill in the gaps in the analytics teaching space. And I think sometimes there are certain things that I'm trying to say this as nice as possible. Um, I think there are certain things that administrators at colleges simply will never understand about the analytics space that you can only
Mm-mm.
get by working in it. And I think that's something that our program offers is many qualified people who have been working in the analytics space for years and years and years. I mean, if you think about all of the people that we've had on the podcast, we've had over 76 people at this point on the podcast, and all of those people 5 years of experience, 10 years of experience, blah 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 blah. You All of that knowledge you're just missing out on if you don't
You
sign
just
up
get
if you don't sign up for the program.
Hunter. Okay, well, we don't need to pitch it that hard.
No, I
We've had
know, but
181 people apply. Like, I'm not worried about like hard selling this
no, I
program.
know.
This is more about just like engaging with the audience.
Yeah,
But I think that with college, what you're paying for is the network. Like, you
yeah.
can almost think of it as a 4-year networking event. And High
No,
Point
totally.
University it's got a stellar network. I mean, they've got what Wozniak, they've got the founder of Netflix, like they've got some name brand companies, and they've also got the children of very influential people who go there, right?
Right. Yeah,
So it's like,
well, that one girl in one of my classes. I always tell this story for everyone listening, but there's two people arguing in front of me about which of them had the bigger family room.
right.
It's
So,
like,
yeah, I mean, High Point's demographic is like the top 1%. So, I mean, if you can get a scholar, even if you get a scholarship, it's very, very expensive. I would say it's much more expensive than a public university. Um, so yeah, so I think that the way to think about college is number one, what's the network that I'm kind of buying into? It's almost like going into a sorority or a fraternity. Like, these are the people that you're connected with, to where if you reach out to them and say, hey, I saw that we're both from the same alma mater, I'd like to, have a coffee with you, or do you have time for a 30-minute like informational interview? They're much more likely if you're in that same kind of tribe as they are.
mm-hmm.
All right, so this is an interesting question. How do you get a data analyst job at Mang? So that's Meta, Apple. What's the other one?
Amazon.
Amazon, Netflix, and Google. So
Yeah.
the correct answer to this is that you don't right now, unfortunately. So I know that Google and I think Apple have put on a hiring freeze. So what we're witnessing right now is the first time ever that big tech is not like exponentially growing or growing. Um, I think we may be experiencing a tech bubble pop right now. Um, and I'm also kind of curious as to what's the motivation to wanting to work for one of these big tech companies? Is it just the status thing?
I think oftentimes it's the salary consideration. But I
Right.
think we're gonna see maybe a little bit of a drawback on that, especially like you said, with we're seeing it maybe a potential tech bubble bust.
Well, this is the conversation that me and Justin had of he. By the way, he actually got an interview with Warner Brothers. I don't know if I told you that.
Wow.
So he was like, I want to get on a name brand company. I want to be an analyst for them. Um, that the downsides of that is that they are going to work you to death, and you're just like one of their minions. I think the turnover rate at Amazon is like the average person lasts like 3 years there. I mean, it's not a very sustainable long-term path for most people. I think that you're working like insane hours. I mean, the fact that Google has a cafeteria and they have ping pong and whatever on site, it's not there to make your life better. It's there so that you spend all your time and your life becomes you're a Google employee. So as far as work-life balance goes, I don't think that those are the greatest companies to work with. Although I haven't worked there, so this
Well,
is just
I was gonna
the
say
anecdotal
we've had
experience I've heard. Yeah,
I
off
was
air.
gonna say we've had Amazon guests on multiple times, multiple Amazon guests,
We
including
have, yeah.
Danny Lauer, who is one of your good friends. And I don't bring this up when I'm interviewing them, but I notice this every time I ask this question. It's like, how do you like working at Amazon? And it's kind of like it's almost like they turn the question around to, oh, I get paid a lot, a
Right.
little, right? And so it's like at that point, it's like more of what you want.
Well, yeah, well, I think that maybe getting in one of these name brand companies early on in your career, it's kind of like going to Harvard. Like if you can say I was an analyst at Google, when you go to interview for other jobs, that's going to look pretty good as far as brand positioning for you.
Hmm.
But the other trade off too is that the bigger the company you work for, the more specific and defined your role is. To where the conversation I was having with Justin was, look, if you get at a smaller company, let's say they're 100 million in revenue, you
Hmm.
could essentially work, you could functionally position yourself as this chief information officer. So if you come in, start analyzing the data, build a system around that, and maybe get people underneath you, you can rise. There's no one there. I mean, it's not. There's not even a rising. It's like you are creating your own department, and I find that much more interesting and engaging. You can also have a much more bigger relative impact for the business,
Hmm.
to where you're going to be optimizing something that has already been optimized upon optimization at these other companies,
Yeah.
most of the time. Now they may be expanding to some other spaces, but I think most of that work is very very specific, to where I think I'm just more of a generalist. And it's kind of funny that me and Hunter are both on this call, because Hunter, I think you're more of a specialist, I'm more of a generalist. So I would
Well,
feel very trapped. Well, I did uh 2 months, or not 2 months, 6 months of internships at a $12 billion company when I was getting my MBA, and it was existentially depressing and drab for me. It was a struggle to go.
I was gonna say, I mean, I see myself as more of a specialist than you, but I still wouldn't consider myself what many would probably consider to be a specialist, where
Hmm.
it's like only one or two unique skills, like you were talking about earlier, where it's like everyone becomes very skills oriented. I think that's what oftentimes a specialist means to people, is being like really cued in on one or two skills.
Well, it's interesting because that's when I started my consulting agency. I branded myself as a Tableau specialist,
Hmm.
and I realized how limiting that was,
Hmm.
because like the project we're working on now uses Power BI, so I'm immediately weeded out of that.
Right.
So positioning from a Tableau specialist to an analytics expert, I mean that's a much broader umbrella. So not only am I consulting and advising, but I'm also teaching.
Hmm.
So it's just that's a better fit for me than I want to do this one specific type of work. And I think that there is kind of a cottage industry that's developed around Tableau. Like you can make a six-figure income on Upwork if you wanted
Yeah.
to just do Tableau work. Like that is possible.
Yeah, Dustin says, agree with the sentiment that it depends what you want. There's significant opportunities presented by being the go-to person, building out something new in a smaller company.
Yeah, depends on there's a yeah. I think too. I am much more of a creator entrepreneur than I am a manager, and I'm realizing that I need to develop better managing experience. I think it just doesn't appeal to me as much.
Hmm.
It's like we can go and hunt something new or build something new or chase something versus, all right, this is established. Let's get all these ducks in a row. All right, cool. Katish, I'm not sure what you're talking. I just pinged them on
This
Slack.
was this was from, I don't remember, we were talking. I think we were talking about
Okay,
staying in touch with the team and working remotely. So she was saying she just pings them on Slack.
gotcha. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Hunter,
Yeah.
there you go. So you're managing me. I needed that. Thanks a lot for organizing such a useful program. You're welcome, Shamim.
um,
Let's see. Home of the Obsessed. I love these like random YouTube names. It's like, who are you? Python seems to be used by the big companies. Um, I can't really speak on that because I don't have a ton of experience with the bigger companies. Hunter, Python is open source though, right?
Yeah, so I worked for about a month and a half with Python. I was trying my best to learn it from someone who was really, really professional and knew it for many, many more years than I knew it. And I even he would acknowledge to me that sometimes some of the things that we were learning were never going to be used realistically.
Interesting.
And I think that um, I think that oftentimes the case is that um, you can get easily lured into that trap of becoming the coder working in a corner, as our last guest actually, Peter was talking about, um, where he was saying, you don't want to just be the coder in the corner. You want to bring something to the company that actually changes the company.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily know that a fundamental understanding of Python is going to be required in every big company. Um,
You know who I would go to for this? I would be obsessed, which is not your name, clearly. Check out Shashank Kalanithi's YouTube channel, because I know that I just watched something of his recently, and I know like Python is part of his stack that he uses. I know that he just transitioned from a data analyst role at Nordstrom to a data engineering role at a much smaller company, but I'm sure that he's got some advice on Python that we're more general analytics and kind of like career focused, to where if you want like very specific deep advice on Python, um, go look towards someone like him. I think Luke Barros might actually be doing some more technical stuff as well. So yeah, I would go.
last I saw, yeah, I
Yeah,
think.
go check out what they're doing. So yeah, we're getting a ton of Python questions. Do we need Python in depth, or is it okay to learn Python only necessary for data analytics? Um, Maybe we could pivot this question of like how thorough do you need to know a tool? I have thoughts
Right.
on this, but I'm curious what your thoughts are, Hunter.
I don't think you need to know any tool thoroughly at all. I think that you can pick up the necessary knowledge for the specific project that you're working on, and then use that knowledge uh, later on. It's building knowledge on top of each other, instead of having to try to force your brain to memorize a big chunk of information at once and expect to retain that knowledge for the rest of your life. I've always found it to be better to just apply little bits of knowledge when you need it, and then it's like then you can say in your mind as you're looking back, "Oh, I remember when I worked on that KPI chart for the other company. I had this exact same problem. Let me just go reference that real quick." What do you think about?
Yeah, I think that this sounds like an academic mindset of I need to know the deep origins and theory of Python. I need to know, what did the
Who
founder eat for
invented
breakfast?
Python?
Yeah, like I need to get in the whole lore and backstory. No, I like if think about it from this metaphor. If you're hiring a carpenter, do you think that he is? Are you going to ask him like, well, can you tell me about the evolutionary history of the hammer? Like, I don't care about that. Like, what have you built? So
Right.
I think that the correct approach is with any tool, it doesn't have to be Python specific, is go find a problem to solve and then learn the bits and pieces of it that are going to help advance that. And I think that what's missing for most people is that they are really weak on business acumen. So they don't understand business or business problems. It's like go find a business problem to solve. And it's a little bit more difficult in the analytics space than, for example, software engineering. Because like Hunter Loftus, the way he got his job at Adobe, who's one of our recent guests, um, he went and worked on an open source problem and solved their tooltip
Mhm.
on the Adobe, the editing software is launching a web version. He figured that out, and then they hired him. He worked with them on that project, open source project, for 6 months. Um, I wish there were more problems like that. But that being said, you can look to your personal life. Like maybe you could look at your finances, or if you care about sports, start, develop an algorithm to predict sports outcomes.
Mhm.
I'm not a sports ball fan, so I don't,
Well,
or
so
environmental science or something like that.
here's actually a perfect actual example is once again I'm bringing back up Peter, but he when he was first applying for his going through his job application process, um the HR company that he was applying through, he actually brought them a better application process than what they had before
Oh, that's
in
cool.
in his actual interview for the job. And but the point is like from that, like that is you already bringing value to the company in the interview. And it's like, okay, that's some if you're looking to make yourself pop, that's a great way to do it, is to bring value rather than just show like Python skills.
You know, I
Background.
just had a realization. I think it's a major challenge for entry level people to learn about business and business acumen because they're just not in the conversations.
Hmm.
Like I just had a meeting with our apprenticeship client, their CFO, and we were talking about business and the impact of inflation and what's going on with the economy. I don't think that entry level analysts are having those kinds of conversations with executives.
Hmm.
And I'm realizing that I think part of the benefit of this podcast is we're starting to have those conversations just out and open, because before it would be kind of behind, it would be up multiple levels if you're in a big city or behind closed doors, to where now we're starting to have conversations and just talk about just I almost think of it as like, what are the plays that you're making? It's almost like to bring in a sports analogy.
I for one have loved being on with the new guests and seeing the apprentices actually get their problems diagnosed. I just think it's cool watching from the outside in, but it's also, I think they probably think it's really cool because it's helping them get placed in a job.
Yeah, well, I'll say this: Justin is in the third round of two. Actually, he might have gotten an offer by now. He had two third round interviews and then an interview at Warner Brothers, and he said that the 1 month career services program like completely changed his confidence level. Like he was downplaying everything about himself, and it's almost like you're shooting yourself in the foot in the interview by being overly humble, when it's like,
Right.
no, like take up that space and answer honestly, but like don't downplay yourself.
Right.
All right, so what advice for non-coders who want to be a successful data analyst do you have? Business acumen. I think that piggybacks really well off what we were just talking about. Stop fixating on tools and stop spending hundreds of hours just learning Udemy or LinkedIn courses. Go out and solve a real business problem. And that's going to, well, number one, it's going to, this concept of reticular activation. You're going to identify the things that are necessary, like the skills or the knowledge to solve that problem. It's going to really give you clear focus. And then number two, you can then turn that specific problem that you solved into a very strong narrative of, when they ask an open question of, well, what kind of problems have you solved? Or tell me about a time you used analytic skills to solve a problem. So there you've got ammunition that you could bring into an interview.
And
And then from there,
Paula makes a good point here as well. The size of the project doesn't always matter. Paula had an interview for accounting, but impressed the lead of a data team by talking about a small project that they made, like an Excel data set. So see, even just working in Excel, I mean, that's not at all a complicated tool, but but it impressed this data team just because Paula was presumably able to solve an actual business problem, like you were talking about.
well, okay, I think this is a frame that people don't realize. They think that I need to learn my skill and that's going to impress the interviewer. I think the interviewer sees skills as fluid.
Hmm.
Like it's going to change. Like all I need to do is invest 2 months into this person and then they can learn Python or they can learn R or they can learn Tableau. But what is somewhat static is who you are as a person and a professional. So what you're trying to do in the interview is show that I'm a hard worker, I'm ethical, which I think is that's not talked about often enough. Is that, are you going to lie? Are you going to cut corners? Because that can really bite the employers in the ass long term.
Hmm.
But then also, do you have the gumption and the intellect to actually get problems solved? The story that I feel like we've probably beat this story to death, but Molly, who she was really kind of student number one that I helped get an analytics job. She got hired for a job that she was way, way underqualified for. But the reason they hired her, or a contributing factor to that, is that she told them a story about how she changed her own brakes on her car by watching YouTube videos. So it's like, okay, she didn't know how to do that beforehand, but she just showcased that I'm smart and I'm resourceful. So
Yeah.
and it kind of gets back to what Peter was saying in that last interview is, I'm going to take work off your desk. This is not going to be adult daycare where you're going to have to, nanny me and just like pick up after my mess and make sure that, I'm napping when I need to. Like, it's not like you're a dependent, like you're actually a contributor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. So I feel like we talked about this. So big company or small company? I think it depends on your personality type. And I guess we can expand upon this a little bit more. I think it depends on your value structure. So one of my major values is that I really value novelty and change. Big companies move at a snail's pace. I mean, think about it. It's like driving a major freight liner versus, a small little yacht or speedboat. Like a small company can nimbly pivot very quickly because they don't have all of this forward momentum and just weight behind that to where,
It's a
moving
giant chain of command.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that it kind of depends on your values. That being said, I don't mind I'm not very risk averse. Like I'm able to take on quite a bit of risk, and I don't value security is kind of like boredom to me. Or if I'm overly secure, I feel like I start to get bored with things. With a bigger company, typically speaking, now some of them do fail from time to time. It's a much more stable, predictable environment. To where if you're at a startup specifically, I mean, Hunter, what does your day look like working for Silvertone?
Well, my day looks like
There's no
messaging
typical
people.
day.
I mean, it could be a million different
Yeah.
things. It could be one day I wake up and I see a text from you, "Hey, design a new thumbnail," or
Right. Yeah. It's just like it's going to change rapidly. And like, for example, we've launched in the past 6 months, we've launched 2 new programs, and we've run beta tests, and we're now in the alpha test phase. So it's going to rapidly move around. So yeah, I would say that the 2 things that I would reflect on yourself are, um, how much do I value novelty and how much do I value security, and kind of balance those 2. If you really want a stable, secure job, and I think it also depends on your life phase too. I'm a 33-year-old single male, so I have very little responsibility right now, to where if I were 45, had a wife, had 2 kids, maybe working at a bigger company would be a lot more appealing to me, because then it's, all right, well, I've got a ton of responsibility. And if things go south in a startup, there's that's a lot heavier situation than, I'm single and I don't have a wife that's going to get mad and kids that are going to go hungry.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's a little bit too intense. All right, we got any other?
Is the Greensboro program? You clicked on it at the same time.
Yeah.
Is the Greensboro program remote available? Yes.
Yeah. So the way that the Greensboro College Apprenticeship program works, and by the way, we have 2 programs now. So if you already have experience as an analyst and you're just looking to get a promotion, we do have a career services standalone package, which essentially is the first month of the full 3-month apprenticeship program. And the way that those work is it's a hybrid approach. So I've developed my own learning platform. You will be taking an analytics foundations course there to make sure that we can shore up your foundational knowledge. On top of, we have 6 real business case studies. And so I'm pulling data off my own learning platform. So you'll have a portfolio that is actually true to form to business. It's not like you're studying fake data, like Sally has 3 peaches and Tom has 2 apples, blah, blah, blah. It's not like a cookie cutter, like academic data set. And then by the end, you're going to have a portfolio and career services. And that includes also a resume revision, and we're going to be keyword optimizing for your LinkedIn as well. So, Hunter, I don't think I've told you this yet, but Miguel has gotten 3 recruiters reach out to him, which is phenomenal to me.
Very impressive. Very impressive.
For those of you who are listening, so Miguel is the first person we've led in the program who doesn't have a college degree. I actually ran into him. We both do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and turns out he found me on YouTube and then came up to me after practice one day, which was really weird. Cool though. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But maybe it's because we built, like, he didn't have a LinkedIn profile before, but we keyword optimized. So he is showing up in search results for recruiters. And I think that is just fascinating to me because right now it's a competitive advantage. Like I don't think most people, for those of you who are listening, do you understand what SEO is and how it can apply to your LinkedIn profile?
I do. I do. I do.
Okay, Hunter, what is SEO?
SEO is search engine optimization. It's essentially the design of keywords to match algorithms that
Job people?
job hiring managers are
Tell me
using.
about these job people.
These job people, the hiring managers are using to find quality candidates. And so that's something that we give you in the program is the ability to tweak those keywords so that they exactly match what that algorithm is going to spit
Well,
out.
I would say it goes deeper than that too, in that first month, which by the way, what's his name? Daniel. So the apprenticeship program is 3 months and it's a hybrid approach. So you take courses on my learning platform and then we meet as a cohort once a week, and we do that for 3 months. But okay, what was it? What were we talking about? I feel bad because I didn't like close that thread.
Search engine optimization.
So that first month, I throw sales data, marketing data, finance data, psychographic data, I think marketing data from all different verticals of a business. And subversely, what we're doing in that month is we're almost like giving you a personality test in the analytics space. So do you like finance data or do you like marketing data? Do you like sales data? So what we're doing is we're figuring out where do you fit into the analytics umbrella. Then once we get that information, we then start to build a personalized or tailored brand to that. So, if it's financial analytics, financial analyst is going to go right there in your headline on LinkedIn. And then we're going to have, the tools that are relevant for that. We're going to have the keywords that are showing up in the job postings and just overall within that space. So then you start to rank higher based on others you're competing for. And I guess to kind of round out what we were talking about with Miguel, this is wide open right now. And I don't know how long this will last because essentially what we're doing is we're applying tactics that I developed in my own startup from a business to a personal individual's brand.
Mm-hmm.
And that may just be the next evolution of how careers work, that everyone is their own individual brand and that's going to be common knowledge. But
Right.
as of yet, the proof of concept is that we took someone who has no degree, had no LinkedIn, and now is getting multiple recruiters reaching out to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just wide open right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot more of this going into the future as people notice the first of all, oh, I'm paying $40,000 to be taught things that I can teach myself for much, much cheaper.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of what that's a good point for us to close out on is so we've had I don't know maybe 15 to 20 people who have a master's in analytics, data science, statistics, or math apply for the program, and this is kind of just like a word of warning. Do not think that getting a master's degree is going to guarantee that you're going to get a job. A lot of my undergrads at Greensboro College, like my full-time undergraduate students, are making almost double some of the masters in data science people. And I find that number one, it's just shocking to me. It's like you have a master's degree and you're making $45,000 a year. Like that is and you on top of that, you probably spent 20, 30, $40,000 to get that. I think that this is a trend that is going to be corrected in the future, but I am really upset and kind of beside myself in that person might be just like screwed for the foreseeable future. Like this might have negatively impacted their entire like trajectory of their life. Like
Right.
getting that degree because now they're $40,000 more in debt. They have this useless degree, and now they're discouraged. Like they're depressed.
Mm-hmm.
I see this as somewhat insidious that a lot of these um, colleges and universities, it's a lot of grad schools are just money grabs.
Yeah. Well, they're advertising. They're advertising getting you a guaranteed job. They're selling you something that isn't guaranteed. And it just depends on yourself and the network that the college has.
Okay, this is a good question. Thank you, Jason, for this.
Also,
I
before I'm sorry, but real quick to interrupt,
what?
Jason, I do remember you asking this question last week. Come back again next week because we're having our episode with the person who actually had a gap in employment, and so I'll answer it then as well. But continue. I'm sorry.
So one of the things that we've been telling the people who are interviewing, because I've talked to probably 30 people who are in a similar spot. One tactic is to get re-educated. So going back to school. I know it sounds like I just contradicted myself in that. Well, I don't think that the two things negate themselves. I think that a lot of graduate programs are predatory, but I also think that going back, if you have a gap, that's an opportunity for you to reset and completely rebrand yourself. Because yeah, that's tough. It's really tough to explain. But if you go back and get a degree, it's like, okay, well, they don't care about what happened before that. And I think the apprenticeship program could potentially come in there, maybe even just getting the certification and saying I went and got certified by this college, and then yeah, you do kind of need somewhat of an explanation now. Also, one thing that you could start doing is, can you start freelancing in any capacity? Even if it's part-time, you can say, this is what I'm doing now. So that way you're not just unemployed, and you're not, what do they call it? Is it NEET? Not employed, education, or in training. And unfortunately, and this is something I'm like morbidly fascinated with, is like that is a growing proportion of young men. And I think Great Britain and the United States are the two studies that I've seen, or the two videos I saw talk about that. Young men are dropping out of college at unprecedented rates, and they're just kind of falling. A lot of them are just falling through the cracks. So I think that, see if you can start freelancing and potentially consider going back and getting educated or re-educated. Awesome. So, I would tell someone to look into having your employment pay for your master's degree. Kumar, that is a excellent observation. I think that if you get it set up with a really good company, they are going to incentivize you. Now, you may run into a golden handcuff situation where they will pay you to get your master's degree. They'll pay for the master's degree. Or, for example, like Naveed, one of the guys who was featured on the podcast, I think he paid all but $1,000 for his MBA, and I think he went to UNC Pembroke. So that's probably $20,000-$30,000 that they paid for. The golden handcuff situation is that they are, they're probably going to lock you into a contract. So you got to, if they pay for it, you got to stay for 3 to 5 years or something like that. So that doesn't sound like too bad of a situation, although that's all contextual based on, is it a terrible company? If you hate the culture, don't let them lure you in to staying in a bad company culture just because they're going to pay for it. But yeah, and I think that this is also a great risk mitigation strategy. So that person I was telling you about, who is making $45,000, has a master's in data science, they took on a shit ton of risk getting and paying for that out of pocket. And then now there are $20,000-$30,000 more into debt, and they're in the exact same spot. So they're just way, way worse off. So you want to avoid that pitfall in that situation as much as possible. Interesting. So Kumar was saying negotiate. I think, Hunter, do you think he was referring to the golden handcuffs?
Yeah, I think he was might have been referencing that, but
you really don't have much leverage in that situation, because if think about it this way, if you were seeking the company to pay for you to get re-educated, you're not providing a ton of value. You're not like the chief data scientist or the key employee that is running X department. Usually you have to master's degree to work up to that. But I mean, if you can figure out how to leverage, find some leverage on that company, for sure, exploit that as much as possible. Paula has some great advice here. So Paula was saying, Jason, definitely check out Upwork for paid independent contractor data gigs. And Jason, I don't know your level of expertise, but they even have like data entry roles. So maybe
Yeah.
string together some of those and then start building some experience doing that, and just kind of stepwise yourself up to much higher paying jobs. There's this guy, I cannot remember the name off his, I think it's like Joshua Barnes Tech. Um, and what he does is he is a YouTuber that makes content about how he basically figured out Upwork. I think he makes like $180,000 a year just on Upwork contracts alone. So I think it's Josh something Tech. I cannot remember that off the top of my head, but I'm sure that like he's got a whole dedicated channel about that ecosystem. I dipped my toe in it, and I think it was bad timing. So Upwork has gone through a few iterations. So if we can get to the lore of Upwork, I think 5 years ago, it was mostly people outsourcing tech work to people in lower GDP areas. So, like for example, someone in India would charge 1/10 of the price that I would. So I was getting no traction on bidding on contracts. But they've recently toggled on a U.S. jobs only, and I know that sounds kind of like I don't know, exceptionalist. Like if you're outside of the U.S., I didn't make that, but I think that the trend has gone backwards in that I think there's a downside to outsourcing work to India, and that there's number one, there's like a 12-hour time delay, and I think somewhat of a language barrier issue.
And it all also wraps back around to talk about that whole remote work discussion that we had, where it's like you're not really coordinating with somebody who is close to the company, physically close, because that does matter.
Right. Yeah, I think that it is really interesting how culture develops, because when I was your age, the idea of getting a remote job was like, oh my God, that's amazing. That would be so cool. Now, a lot of even my undergraduates, like Christina, her first job is a remote job. She's like, oh man, this kind of sucks. Like like I'm realizing that, or working remotely, her position is awesome. Working remotely is isolating, and she didn't have that interaction with people. So it's just fascinating seeing how culture goes back and forth. Because now it's like, when I was your age, I would love to have a remote job. Now a lot of people are like, oh man, I wish I were in person, especially because you get that mentorship for entry level. All right. So Paulo was saying, I keep saying his name wrong.
Shashank.
It's Shashank.
Shashank?
I think it's Shashank.
Okay.
Shashank Kalanithi also used Upwork to build his data skills outside of his day job, which is also in data. Yeah, I think he's got a video where it's like, this is how I made my side hustle that made me like $20,000 or something like that. I do think it's a good idea. That being said, if you're working full time and you're consulting on the side, you're not going to have a huge social life. So I guess it's a little bit about work-life balance there. If you're single and you want to like really up your career advancement, I think this could be a good idea, because it also gives you more ammunition to talk about in upcoming interviews. Shashank. All right.
Yeah, so you're saying it right.
Shashank.
I
grew up with a guy who had the same name, but it was pronounced the opposite way of how Shashank pronounces it. So I always get confused with that. And because Shashank's been on the podcast multiple times at this point.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've been rattling on for over an hour and 9 minutes now. But this has been fun. I feel bad because we haven't done one of these live streams where it's like we actually get to interact and pull people into the chat. Maybe we'll start to mix these in a bit more. It's also less prep, to be quite honest. Like we just we wrote down like 5 topics that we were like, we're going to lean on these if we run dry of questions from the listeners. But you guys did a great job. Thank you so much for commenting so much and giving us like a I don't know, I guess just conversational threads to tie together.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really great. I think this was exactly what we need, and I think we should see more of these coming up soon. So
Awesome. Paul's being sweet. Thanks for the golden nuggets as always, y'all. All right. Well, let's end it here. Thank you so much, Hunter. I appreciate your time. This has
of
been,
course,
yeah. I feel like we can just riff because we've got rapport developed.
yeah,
We can just go and talk about anything
yeah.
at any time.
This is the freebie episode for me. Then it's back to work next
Yeah,
week.
making your job a little too easy. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'll see you guys later.
Take care, everybody.